Well, Allie, that tells it all. It's not the federal judiciary that's out of control. It's this president and his administration. They are waging war on the federal judiciary and the rule of law. And the federal judiciary, of course, has responded in kind by essentially striking down, at least preliminarily, if not ultimately, every single signature initiative of this president during his first 100 days in office. Now, that's not retaliation by the federal courts. To the contrary, the federal courts are interpreting and applying the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the United States to the clearly unlawful acts and actions of this president. Turning then to the arrest. The arrest of Judge Duggan, as you suggested, was really the beginning of the culmination of this war on the federal courts and the rule of law. Judge Duggan did nothing other than show a litigant in front of her out a side door that led directly into the public hallway in front of her courtroom, rather than have that litigant exit the front door of the courtroom where she knew, Judge Duggan knew, federal agents were awaiting to arrest the litigant before her. Of course, that's nothing more than trying to maintain decorum and respect in her own courtroom and courthouse. And of course, what we heard from the Attorney General of the United States of America, Allie, was that the judges of the United States are deranged. That's the word that the Attorney General of the United States used to characterize the federal and state judges of America. No, the judges are not deranged, Pam Bondi. They are simply enforcing their oath to the Constitution of the United States, the same oath that you, Madam Attorney General, took yourself. I don't know where this ends, Allie, but it appears at this moment that the president intends to prosecute this war against the federal judiciary and the rule of law to its catastrophic end.
I want to ask you, as a former senior member of the federal judiciary, when judges, the president, you and I discussed this. He said to my colleague, Kristen Welker, when asked very directly, is it your job to uphold the Constitution? Said, I don't know. I got lawyers on the case. The Vice President of the United States is a Yale-educated lawyer. So it's a little surprising that because he does know this stuff. But what happens when federal judges no longer believe that they are either safe because there are actual threats against them or independent? Both of those are threats to the federal judiciary. What happens to the system?
You know, Allie, first off, what the President of the United States actually said to your colleague was very seriously to her question, do you have an obligation to uphold the Constitution? The president leaned forward and said, I don't know. I don't know. I have said that those are perhaps the most important words ever spoken by a president of the United States, saying that he doesn't know whether he is obligated to uphold the Constitution. The vice president, yes, he's a lawyer trained, and so we presumptively he knows what he's talking about. But to listen to him, he has no clue what he's talking about. Now, what we do know from what he says, and this is what your viewers need to understand, is that the president and the vice president of the United States do not believe that under the Constitution of the United States, It is the Supreme Court that determines the law. Another way to put it more academically is they do not believe in the bedrock precedent of Marbury against Madison, where Chief Justice Marshall first wrote, not long after our founding, that it is the responsibility of the Supreme Court to decide what the law is. Not the president, not the Congress, the Supreme Court. Many people in MAGA, many Republicans, and certainly this president and the vice president, they would overturn Marbury against Madison to the extent that the Supreme Court determines what the law is with respect to the executive of the United States. This is
Judge,
it doesn't get any more serious than this, Ali.
Well, you know, in the time that you and I have known each other, we've had conversations I didn't expect that we'd ever be discussing on television. But one of them, as you know, is that the U.S. Federal Marshals Service, which protects most federal judges, answers to the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. There are some people who are saying maybe it's time to figure out a different way to protect judges, given what the Attorney General of the United States has said about judges, that they're deranged. What's your take on this?
Well, let me explain for your audience. The Marshals Service protects the federal judges, but the Marshals Service is located within the Department of Justice. So basically, what we have today, given the threats against the federal judiciary by the President of the United States, the Vice President and his administration, and the Attorney General, is that you have the protection of the federal judges under the supervision and control of the President and the Attorney General. If I were a sitting judge today, I literally would not accept the Marshals Service protection from this administration in light of all that we've know, and frankly, Ali, all that we're being told every day by the president and his administration. Why would any judge believe that he or she would be protected by the Marshal Service? And that brings to the forefront your question. As you know, and your audience needs to know, there have been serious discussions among the policy organs of the federal judiciary as to whether the judiciary can count on the Marshal Service and the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi to protect them. There's no reason at all to think that the Marshal Service would protect the federal judges when they rule against this administration and this president. Because, as we know, every time that a judge so far has ruled against the president or his administration, the president, the vice president, Elon Musk, and the other cabinet members and White House senior staff have threatened the judge, threatened the individual judge by name with impeachment and otherwise, Ali. This, to me, is just common sense. I mean, the Chief Justice of the United States, speaking for the Supreme Court, is telling the American people just this. His statement last week that the rule of law in America is endangered is of surpassing significance to the nation.